For the next 20 minutes, or thereabouts, I think Sophia will be keeping me honest with time countdown. We're going to look at, we've heard a few things actually. It was a nice segue from Drew around, some of the impact of signals and high fidelity, low fidelity coming into the SOC. So let's look at the modern SOC and certainly the impact of artificial intelligence. So in Davos last week, there was very much a lot of talk, and we saw some of the surveys earlier around, the impact of, or the emergence of artificial intelligence. And whilst there's very much a view that it can absolutely be utilised to help solve global challenges, there's also a view that it needs to be taken also with, there's further development needed, as ever, but also there needs to be guardrails applied to how that's deployed. Well, what we're also seeing, it's interesting, a PwC report, it's fantastic, but across the UK and US, I think in the UK, 40% of bosses, leading companies, from AI adopters, are absolutely moving to adopt artificial intelligence this year. They are moving ahead. Now, that is almost 4 times greater speed than some of our European counterparts. I think it's about 10% was in France, 20% in Germany, almost on a par. I think there was only 2-3 companies that were, 3 countries that were ahead. So what we can take from that is that AI is definitely, we're very much across UK, US, at the forefront of looking at how we can use artificial intelligence to drive outcome. And then with the Tech Trends report just released this month, 65% of the people that were asked across those businesses were saying that security and identifying risk was going to be a mainstay of how AI was going to be utilised when they were onboarding it. So with that in mind, I guess, and there's a lot of talk around there, and I think we're very, very aware that when we unpack that, it's not going to be for everyone straight away day one. There's going to be an element of readiness that needs to go through. And we don't have all that, but basically to discuss that and how we can look at both dealing with the threat that exists with and without AI, and look at some of the challenges that brings. As I said, I've got Paul here and Steve. So, gentlemen, maybe if I can lead off with a first question to Paul. So, let me kick this off by asking you, from a Microsoft viewpoint, what are the latest trends that you're seeing in the wider threat landscape and from sort of certain behaviours from threat actors?
Sure. Cheers, Mark. Hey, first off, just a thank you actually for the invite and the opportunity to spend some time with you here today. I feel I've been educated, which has been fantastic, all the way back from Sir Graham's session, thinking about geopolitical tensions on the battlefield, going back generations, all the way through to toilets to Schiphol Airport. Phenomenal. Plus the last session there, actually, to come to your question about identity, completely relevant. And I know I am probably preaching to the converted with this audience, but where you ask, hey, what have we seen in terms of the recent threat landscape? And we do an annual report on this. Our ethos is we feel we've got this particular position whereby we see threat telemetry across everything from Azure to Xbox. It's a crazy number, 60 trillion signals a day. And we think that should be shared in the public domain. We think where we see behavior from threat actors, that should be public, should be built into the technology and the services, ultimately to help you protect your critical assets and data. But to come to identity, because what we've seen over the last 12 months, identity top of the list, continues to be so. 42% of the attacks that we witnessed, and particularly where we notify end user organizations, that was the primary category, followed then by phishing and ransomware, but 25%. And then business email compromise, which although sub 5%, is often the most lucrative from particularly the criminal entities, right? And you'll be familiar with some of the scenarios, the social engineering, the tactics that they deploy to, exploit substantial financial sums from organizations. Probably the last 2 things I'd say is, when we track cyber criminals versus nation states, the cyber criminals each year upping their tradecraft. They are the most collaborative. They are the first adopters, was said in an earlier session. We definitely see that. So for example, moving completely to the cloud, VMs to launch DDoS attacks, for example. And then on the nation state side, the last 12 months, we've seen a little bit of a refocusing. So where they were kind of widespread in their targeting, they become more focused now, particular focus on espionage. And no surprises, critical national infrastructure targets high on the list for sure.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, Steve, let me throw that to you. So, not great news in some regard. Everything's up, everything's scaling up, whether that be ransomware, identity, phishing, DDoS. First and foremost, we run a SOC, we're a defender.
Yep.
So, what are you seeing that we are doing to double down against this threat? And I mean, maybe touch on things like, MXDR. What are we looking to help manage this escalation of threat in the wider landscape?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, ask ourselves, why XDR? And when you listen to everything you've heard today, I think what can clearly be called is we've got a very broad field of risk. It's not the days of putting perimeter security out there, putting some agents on endpoints, job done, is long gone. People will find a soft point to attack, be it your IoT, be it your email and attacking the human. And as we saw, lateral movement, get to the crown jewels and create catastrophic impact on business. And so as defenders, we need to have a set of tools looking at that kill chain, looking at that ecosystem. And that's really the change that we have at a technology level from where we were in the past with, yes, lots of tools, but very siloed built, very focused in a particular area, but not working together. And actually they could become counterproductive in creating lots of noise that was clouding the issue, rather in XDR what it's doing is working together, getting better conclusion. And so you may have subtle signals across different points of the environment that in isolation, not one of those tools may flag up. But when you see the bigger picture, it's bringing it to the attention of the SOC. So understanding the kill chain and how these attackers are working and making sure that we've got the right tools doing the right things is really how it has to drive that SOC. But also the recognition that the SOC isn't operating in isolation. Think back to that government model, the SOC's really the third wheel, so the third vector of that 5-point image. You've still got to get vulnerability managed. Why leave the door wide open? Because you've got an alarm system. So how does the SOC work with the client to help them understand where those vulnerabilities are, where those risk points are, where posture can be improved, where MFA can be strengthened, where conditional access may be failing, and so help the client help themselves put the protections in place, which then feeds the SOC by saying you've got less noise and you can find true risk.
Okay, so again, it comes back to the point of being sort of holistic, both in design, the right control securities, and then eyes on to monitor it. And we've talked around just pure SOC and increasing threat. We haven't even talked about AI yet. So before we maybe even get to the defenders and the benefits that are inherent perhaps with that, but what are you seeing from a Microsoft standpoint in terms of how generative AI is being used by attackers? And perhaps maybe talk through some of the use case scenarios that you're seeing out there in the wild.
Sure. So what we're seeing, automated phishing, polymorphic malware, for example, so iterating the signature of the malware each time to make it that bit more difficult to detect. Automated scouting, for sure. It was interesting yesterday, Lindy Cameron, the head of the NCSC, launched a report on this topic about how AI was being used by the threat actors. And she described it as evolutionary, not revolutionary. So it's, as we say, kind of phishing attacks we've all been defending against for multiple years, but they're upping their game, upping their trade craft for sure. And then, AI itself, choosing your AI platform, building guardrails and controls around that are important too. For sure, you think about prompt engineering, you think about the information sources that it will draw on. So that's a separate consideration that it's just, with the help of ITC Secure, that it's important to do the design and get your thought process around that. But then, the last thing we certainly come back to though is that we really feel that AI and security will be a force for good because it enables us to tip the scales, tip the balances against those threat actors. With that vast compute power that sits behind it, we think that it will help us change the game.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, Steve, what are you seeing from a defender's perspective? AI is stepping up. We're seeing far more sophisticated engineering of attacks, often state-sponsored, looking that's impacting human element. When you covered some of that. But I guess the question to you is, what are you seeing and what can we be doing as people running SOCs or delivering that to defend better against that?
So the first thing is, it's a very obvious strategy, fight fire with fire. So if they're going to use AI, we have to use AI. But it's not as simple as that for a SOC. It's not a case of, well, we've turned on some AI and let's go and have a long lunch. We've got to work with that AI. So we've got to tune it and manage it so it's working in an effective manner. And importantly, we've got to think about how the attackers are operating and how they're using AI. And so it's going to be different in different scenarios. So phishing, called out, and things like Beck, of having more targeted, more credible kind of attacks in the environment. So if you think about phishing, there's obviously been those stories of, a link from a Nigerian prince with multi-million dollars he can't get rid of, click here. We all know that story to say, no, maybe not. It's becoming more credible, more intelligent. So how are the tools able to look for more anomalous behavior in those signals? But also, how do we manage the training and awareness of people? And also thinking about, well, if it is more likely that that phishing attempt could be successful because of its credibility, what do we have in depth behind it? Because it's not an end game that someone's managed to get you to click on that link. So what is it going to try to launch on the endpoint? Is the malware protection going to fire? Is it now going to try to do some lateral movement? And therefore our identity protection can find those signals and we thwart them then. So it's making sure, again, we see that ecosystem. But also thinking about the impact on the human. And there's an interesting story. It goes back to 2019, looking at deepfake and looking at a phishing example, so voice phishing, where a UK exec was scammed by attackers and duped into paying £200 million into a Hungarian supplier. And it was done with AI-driven voice call, who he thought was his German boss. And so he made that transaction 200 million. And that was 2019. And if you go and look at YouTube and go and look at where deepfake is, you'll be amazed at what it's moved on over the last couple of years. There's an interesting one in TED, where they're actually in real time deepfaking the video screen as people are in the audience and are talking. And so, technology isn't the only tool we have. That education of the human, putting in MFA at a human level, you can't just make that decision, go and double check it was that exec talking to you, they claim they're not available, check anyway. And that's the kind of defenses we need to think about.
Okay. So it's very real, it's out there, it's not anything new in a way, it's been moving. Steve, you mentioned fight fire with fire with regards to an AI perspective. And Paul, you've said it, AI can be a power for good. So from that basis, what do you believe and what are Microsoft seeing as the key steps defenders can take to leverage artificial intelligence to turn the table on attackers?
Yeah. Well, that example there from Steve, you think about it from the cyber criminal perspective, as an industry, as an economy, the estimate is that that'll be 10.5 trillion just next year. So it's already, if that was a country, top 5 economy worldwide. So it's massive, right? But then to your question around, okay, so where can AI come into play? Improving detection, response, investigations, then reporting, the ICO, the 72-hour clock, for example, where there's been an issue with breach. So helping on each of those fronts. And then, we really believe looking forward, so predicting threat actor behavior. Where will they go next? What innovations or innovative approaches might they undertake next? We think there's a role there. And then the other area, back to the session earlier on from Munya, we feel LLMs certainly have a positive role to play around education, helping our people. I love the analogy of put prompts right in front of them. That's the best way as humans that we're going to respond. And we think LLMs can really help on that front and broadly on education and awareness.
Okay. And Steve, dare I say, Microsoft, there's been a lot of noise around Copilot for security. I'll get the name right. And on that, for those who don't know, just changed. But for us as obviously we joined the early Microsoft Access program, as did our sister company OneVin. You heard some of the things that Paul was recommending that we do, and I guess we're very much in bed with that. But what are you seeing anecdotally from how we're getting from access to that What are you seeing that can be of value to our end customers and indeed us?
Well, I think for us, we've got to have a very strict mindset of what we're doing. If I look back, and if anyone listens to Wake Up to Money on Radio 5, there's a point in 2023 where every single conversation was AI. And it was a case of AI is the answer, what's the problem? And we've got to think of what's the problem? What are outcomes we're looking at? And Paul covered it. How is AI going to help us help our clients? Is it going to help us react to risk faster? Is it going to help us get greater coverage across that ecosystem? Is it going to help us come to conclusive decisions quicker? Removing the false alarms, recognizing the true risk. Is it going to help us speed up getting remediation into that client? And so we have to then think about the practicalities of that. What does a SOC work with and how does it help them? So as we are receiving a ticket, is that ticket now being enriched with important indicators, letting us get to a conclusion without having to go and find that data? If we ask it questions, are we getting answers quickly and are they accurate? Are they helping us? Is it telling us of other data that we wouldn't normally get? So one of the things it has to do for us is raise the bar of the SOC. If you've got your best analyst in there who always knows what to do, is AI going to learn his practice or her practice, and share that and drive that into the tickets for the rest of the team, and therefore improving consistency of operation and service to clients? And then is it going to go and be proactive at looking wider in the environment to find other related threat for the analyst rather than them having to do that? So ultimately, getting real tangible ways that we can look at it and say, is it making our clients more secure?
Okay, yeah. So I like that you went back there and said, AI is the answer, what's the question? Okay, so, but actually it's much more real than that, yeah? And I mean, we're moving fast at pace. Microsoft's been moving fast with the program to deliver it. I'm sure you want to share in terms of where that is in terms of general availability. And we've talked through attackers are using it, and we've talked through some of the benefits that can be available for defenders to defend against it. But in real terms, what's Microsoft doing right now in this space, both internally in terms of its usage, but I guess for the audience here, for customers and partners?
Yeah. So internally, I suppose we've long known that we're a popular target, in terms of the attackers, right? They'll often want to hone their skills on Microsoft for sure. And, internally, there's about 10,000 people broadly across security, a portion of them running our SOC actually. And so what we've been doing, so putting LLMs into practice to, bolster their efficiency, their capability, their responsiveness and time to remediation for sure. We recently announced what we called a Secure Future initiative, which actually for me, but just over 21 years ago, Bill Gates published what he called the Trustworthy Computing Memo, which at the time, Microsoft was churning out CDs and floppy disks for people, PC on every home, every desk in every home. And it really changed our direction across this enterprise provider, mindful that for organizations such as yourselves and kind of enterprises and corporates more broadly, what's important? It's security, it's trust, it's privacy, it's managing risk, And so this Secure Future initiative is the refresh of that, 20 years on, for an AI era actually. And broadly, what it talks to is, so first off, internally, our software development lifecycle, that security is embedded all the way through, from initial idea, concept, all the way through to design. You'd expect that. But that then we're putting AI to use, both internally and of course, in the capabilities that we partner with yourselves in and provide to organizations who come on the platform. And then the last piece is, that role in society and with the sharing that we do with governments as a whole, some of the topics earlier on, some of those nation states, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, for example, we think there's an important cause there in terms of bolstering democracy, kind of that point that we opened up with this morning, hugely important. So I guess a lot of uses probably, but we see AI having a role to play in all of them.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And there is some exciting stuff, and certainly we see that internally. I mean, Steve, obviously this has been a massive sort of acceleration in terms of what we're doing, roadmap, building out, SOC. So can you maybe share with the audience here what, as a key partner to Microsoft, what this means for us? What is it? What's the end game?
No, we're under NDA. No, I mean, it's early days. You know, the service, you know, is not a silver bullet. You know, let's be honest with any you know, I don't think anyone's claiming that. You know, it's not a silver bullet. You have to work with it. You have to retrain your thinking. You know, so we have to train the SOC analysts to think differently, work differently, not just run off and do what they feel is what their normal job and quickest. Actually, they've got to kind of balance out and utilize the tooling available to them, work with that. And because we're in the early access program, we're also having to check the results we get and look for any kind of anomalies and misnomers there. But it's also then, you know, the training of that. It's interesting that, you know, we have an allocation of resource that we can use. You are limited, you know, as any partner on the OP, but the majority of people we have using it are SOC analysts. You know, we have developers, we have consultants, all very skilled and love to get their hands on it, but it's give it to the SOC analysts. Those are the ones who are going to use this to the benefit of the clients. So training them, training the system, driving it to the outcomes. You know, there are things in there like the consolidation of information. You know, the tooling is very integrated with the Defender suite. Defender being integrated now much more with Sentinel in the unified Sentinel Defender portal. And it's about bringing that information together into one place and then having the prompt windows available to you and the information windows available to you so you can come to that conclusion quicker. And you know, we know we're going to have challenges along the way. However, you know, we genuinely believe it will be a game changer for the capability of the SOC.
And a force for good. So, and a real step up for defenders. So Paul, maybe, I mean, it is, we said, it's moving fast, yeah? So in terms of Copilot for security, can you give us an update on where exactly that is? You know, what we're aiming to do in its first instance as it moves into general market availability. And I guess really from your view, how best can organizations get ready themselves to get advantage of this?
Yeah. And hey, you know, we're all learning together. I think everything you just said there, Steve. So where's that right now? This evening actually is the first phase. So we close is the deadline for early access. And so yourselves are on that. There's probably about 30 or so organizations in the UK who are coming on. And while they're learning, we're learning as well in terms of the use cases, the queries that SOC analysts are putting the solution through its paces. Like, it's the first Gen AI solution we feel to help defend at machine speed and scale. Where we go next is March 18th, 19th, just across the river here. We'll do a European launch. It's kind of similar Cyber Summit, actually. We're copying best practices here. And what we do that day is that becomes generally available then, so it's full launch to organizations of all size. Ideally, where if they are using Defender or Entra, now there's of course there's APIs into all other solutions as well, but it's going to be most rich the more telemetry you can bring into this. And from there on, you know, I suppose the first couple of use cases are in the SOC, but we feel like over the next 2-3 years, the Microsoft engineering teams will be busy building out new capabilities, and that's where I think getting best use of what's there, plotting your own journey, you know, with expert help to utilize what's there from general availability, but also the future areas that come on stream. I think that's the right thing, the right approach to take.
Okay. So it's coming soon. I guess some research comes to mind, because again, I don't think it's going to be for everyone day one. There's a journey, and then people are going to be on different steps of that journey. I think certainly the research that Tech Trends was showing was that businesses with significant budgets in the first instance, 10 million plus, or larger enterprise, will certainly be leading the way quicker, and perhaps they've got a staff that's ready to utilise that. But I mean, Steve, with that and what's coming in, you know, what's your advice? What's your advice in terms of how we can get ready to start either moving forward with that, or indeed getting ready for taking that on and embracing it?
Yeah, a couple of things. First one is, you know, I kind of think of AI as an amplifier. And so if you don't put anything in, or you put the wrong thing in, you get nothing out. If you put noise in, you get noise out. So if you're in a chaotic environment with lots of bad posture, bad controls, bad things going on in that environment, you know, you're going to create a lot of noise to then have to go and manage. So you know, recognize it doesn't work in isolation. You've got to get ready for that and feed for that. Another thing is that change your mindset. I do think, and conscious of Sigrain's comment about having a strategy in a very unknown waters, but you know, we know we've got these challenges around the world of cybersecurity. We know they're increasing, and we know the portfolio that Microsoft is creating around their XDR space, and with AI, you know, is about getting greater value than the sum of the parts. And so people need to think about where they're going on their journey. There is, and we've referenced it today, there's that historic approach of kind of silo, best of breed solutions. What's my point problem? What's my point solution? How do I address email this month? How do I address endpoint in 9 months' time? We need to start thinking strategically in cybersecurity about where we want to be. We might not be in a position to take on AI in 2024 or even 2025, but how do we get there? That when we do get to that point, we're ready for it, not having to do a wholesale uplift of all of our controls because we've got the wrong things in there to be able to maximize that value. And so you've kind of got to back your strategy, you know, and be on that journey and start to go, well, okay, I'm going to stop looking in isolation and think about that ecosystem and look at the bigger picture and see the value of doing that. So we've already been having that view in XDR, and AI has just doubled down on that. You know, and so to get those real returns, it will be about having those right things in place. So having those systems on that journey and getting your postures and your controls addressed so that when you do turn on the amplifier, you've minimized that noise and you're arming the SOC, whether that's an internal SOC or whether it's someone you've outsourced to, you're arming them to find those things, you know, and drive the value of the technologies.
Okay. So I think thank you. I mean, we come to the end of it. I don't know if there's anything else particularly you wanted to bring out, otherwise I'll summarize. But I think from what I'm hearing is certainly, look, shock horror, cyber threats escalating, AI is being used by attackers. But being secure by design, deploying the right controls is critical. That hasn't changed, yeah? AI can step up our defenses, I think certainly a message. And actually, it's going to be available in its first instance, and it's something that we're learning on with guardrails and everything, but from April, March, and we're able to do that. And I think whilst all businesses are not ready from day one, we've said there are definitely steps that you can take either to moving to it or getting ready for it. And it is going to be something that is going to be there at some point in the future. I think that's certainly what I'm taking from that session. But I mean, is there any closing remarks either of you have? Otherwise, we'll look to get you on stage for Ask the Experts, because I'm sure there'll be some questions from the audience.
I think that the one thing I would say, you know, is do look at that triangle of people, process, technology. You know, so AI is a technology. AI is enhancing the capabilities of technology. You've still got to have the people to use it. You've got to have the processes in place to drive those people. You know, when we're talking about behavior earlier, and I'm not going to bring any analogies with flies, you know, but you know, behavior is reinforced by process. You know, and so how do we bring those things together? And so when people are looking at the market and looking at 3-year strategy, don't get bogged down by the technology. Don't get, you know, caught up with where's currently that top right-hand side in Gartner Magic Quadrant. Think about the outcomes you're looking to achieve. And whether you're looking internally doing all of this or you're looking at external partners, think about the outcomes you're going to get from the solution and service. Don't get bogged down in the technology.